We're just going to give it a few minutes so that more people can join before we start. But you're welcome. You're all welcome.
Or just wait. Okay.
You might have to do it twice.
Yeah, fair. You're right. Fair enough. To those that are coming in, I know I'm not the usual face you would expect to see when you do these events, but I am obviously at the behest of Tahara Collective. My name is Ayodeji Dabiri. I've been part of Tahara since 2015, 2016, I think. Very, very, very behind the scenes. Not even fully behind the scenes like that, because I'm not like the planning meetings and everything. But I think I've been an active member of the community for about 5 years. I live in Lagos, Nigeria. I'm an entrepreneur. I work in technology, a bit of advertising, and a bit of corporate comms. That one is by mistake, but yeah, thank you very much.
Very thorough introduction.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Boilu Atise Ojikutu, or BMO, as I'm known on in Lagos. Yeah. How long have I been with Tahara? Yeah, I would say since 2017. Yeah, that was when I was introduced to Tahara, and yeah, that's about my. Oh, that's all in my introduction.
You can tell them you're a lawyer now.
Well, we're just Muslim brothers and sisters here today, so let's leave my legal background in this chat.
I know, thank you. So we are, okay, I think we can pretty much start. I think we've crossed the threshold for attendees. So like I mentioned earlier, for everyone just joining us, my name is Ayodeji Dabiri. I am one of the panelists for this discussion. We're a team of 4, but typically you probably only see me and Bolu for the most part. We are obviously trying to encourage a lot of, it's supposed to be like a laid back session. We're not trying to, it's not obviously one of the sessions where, like a khutbah or anything like that. We're really just trying to talk, communicate, engage with each other. Typically the type of things we will do as a community. If you're being for the growing up Muslim sessions, I think we're doing it every other Sunday in Dolphin Estate. We used to sit in a circle, we used to talk, we used to, just share experiences.
Very interactive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So please, we really need interaction. So obviously, we'd want you to use the Q&A. If you have any questions you wanted to leave, but if you wanted to, typically we want you to raise your hand as well, and then you can introduce. We'll be able to allow you to speak to everybody around. So it's a very communal thing, and we would want you to obviously just please be as interactive as possible. Tahara is a judgment-free space. Come as you are.
Yeah.
So we don't hold anybody to any standards like that.
Yes, and please, nobody should be too shy or scared to raise your hand if you want to share. If you want to share your experience via the audio means, and if you don't, you can also use the Q&A. But don't be shy. Feel free to talk. We're looking forward to learning from everybody's experiences. Want to know what growing up as a Muslim was like, what you've had to unlearn, how you're finding your way these days. We just want everybody to be able to learn from each other. So that's what we're really doing here.
Thank you. Also, to let everybody know, this meeting is being recorded. So, we just, obviously, if you don't want to be recorded in any shape or form, then, well, please be recorded. We're not biting.
Yeah. We plan to share the recorded sessions via our mailing list to other people that were not able to join us today, just so that we can reach as many people as possible and able to hopefully share the impact that we'll get here today.
Thank you. So what we would, to start off with, I think, general big picture conversations, we want to know the things that you learned about Islam in the past, and I think we understand in this part of the country where we are, some of the ways we are taught Islam growing up might not necessarily be the best way. So, the things that we've learned and unlearned, the ways we've engaged with the religion, the points where we said, this is for me, this isn't for me, different aspects where, we've had to really delve back into the, into the origins of religion and see what was there for us. So, that's the general theme, learning and unlearning. Everybody's experience is different. But we'd really encourage you guys to share. So let me give an example going first. I think I think it's fairly common for everyone, the whole thing about fearing Allah. And when you listen, when you in our understanding of the word fear, we take it as being afraid. So you have to put it in two hands. One, you're supposed to love Allah, on the other hand, you're supposed to fear Him. And then I think sometimes that fear drives our actions in the religion. But I think you learn about various concepts. For instance, learning about taqwa was very, very important to me. So taqwa, which some people would call fear, but actually what it really means is more God consciousness. And the way a sheikh explained it to me was, imagine it's rained heavily, and then there's water on the floor everywhere, and you have a white garment. So it stopped raining. You have to go from point A to B. Going from point A to B, you are going to avoid the water puddles. You're going to kind of like the way you don't want your dress to get dirty. You don't want to be stained. So it's kind of like the way you move around the puddle, because you're conscious of the water and the effects that it can have on your clothing. So how do you navigate the puddle moving from A to B? That was how it switched my mind in terms of, okay, the way we're supposed to look at it. So we're avoiding things that are not beneficial. Sorry, we're avoiding things that are harmful to us, and we're moving towards things that are beneficial to us. And that was how, just a little thing that, when I learned about, I was like, oh wow, okay, I understand it a lot more. And then you start reading those verses with a bit more insight. So yeah, that's a little way in how I learned something that I'd learned that was pretty steadfast in my mind. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Before we move to some of the participants that have already raised their hands, I'd like to share one thing that I recently learned that I was like, wow, why didn't they teach me this when I was young? And it is simply like trusting Allah. So when we're growing up, you're encouraged, oh, you must pray 5 times daily, you must fast during Ramadan, read your Quran, but nobody tells you, well, let me not say nobody tells you. Me, I wasn't told that when you pray, you need to trust that whatever happens to you is Allah's will. So whether if you pray for something, you pray for A and you don't get A, you get C or G, for example. Don't say, oh, why did I get C, but I prayed for A. Just trust that the C that Allah has given you is what is best for you for now, or maybe is what is best for you throughout your life. So yeah, that's just that trust. Just there was not much emphasis on trusting Allah for me when I was growing up. So it's something I've recently had to learn. So yeah, we're looking forward to listening to what every other person too has been able to learn, or what it is you've heard growing up or you learned growing up that you felt hasn't really helped you now. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a hand raised, Tayo Salako. I'm going to allow you to talk. You just do a quick introduction of who you are, and then please delve into your insights. Thank you very much. So Tayo, please, I think we've asked you to unmute your microphone from your end.
Okay, that's good. I'm muted now, yes?
Yes, yes, you are.
Yes,
you are. Assalamu
alaikum. So I just want to share an experience that I had growing up. I grew up in Ibadan, and I went to the international school. And when I was in international school, our principal was Archbishop Iliomade. And I remember one time he took us in a comparative religion class. We were 11, 12 years old. And he said to us in the class, oh, see, we Christians are the children of Allah, but Muslims are the slaves of Allah. And, he said it in this way it made me feel bad about being a Muslim. And alhamdulillah, I didn't, what happened to a lot of my peers didn't happen to me. I didn't go and find something else somewhere. My parents kind of really supported us in Islam. And now I look back to that time and I say, I am proud to be a slave of Allah. This is why I was created. I am here to worship Allah to the exclusion of all else. And I'm just saying this, that whenever any of us go out and when we are talking to children, we have to let them understand that we are proud to be Allah's slave. That's why we are here. Don't let somebody outside tell them that there's something bad. Oh, we are children of Allah, we're special. No, Allah has no children. But at that time, I was 11 years old, 12 years old. It hurt me very deeply. And this is one thing I want to share. We have to educate our children before people outside educate them in a way that we will not enjoy. Assalamu
Wa alaikum
Alaikum
salam.
salam. Thank you so much for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tayo. That's very interesting. I think there are a few things that come into that small exchange there. You mentioned about being proud of who we are, being proud of being Muslims. And even at that age, I think being referenced to child of God versus a slave of Allah. That as a child, if you've not heard that phrase before, I can 100% see why that would be. You feel embarrassed. So I'm a slave, but this one is a child, so they get better treatment. But obviously, I think this is definitely one of the key things that Tahara wants to help correct. So right from a young age, people are aware of these concepts and what it really means to be a slave of Allah. I don't think the bishop realized, when he made that statement, that really he's paying us a compliment. He is really paying us a compliment. We can't, we are not children of Allah, we are his slaves. There's nothing like the gap in magnificence between Allah and us. It's insurmountable. It's really only by his will that any of us are alive and breathing today. So thank you so much for those insights. It was really fantastic.
Yeah, and I can just imagine what it must have been like for Tayo hearing that as a child. Because again, for me, let me say personally, growing up, I wasn't taught a lot about the love of Allah. So I was just taught to fear Allah, fear Allah. And then when you now hear that, like, oh, you are taught to fear Allah, and then they categorize you as slaves of God, you just start feeling somehow. It could really affect you. So one thing I personally I've told myself I'm going to do for my kids is try to teach them a lot about the love of Allah. Yes, you should fear him, but you should also love him because he really loves you. And I think we really need to teach kids that as well, that Allah loves you, like no matter what, Allah loves you.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Bolu. Let me see. I think there's something under the Q&A. Please, you guys, please, people are not raising their hands. I'm going to start asking people to unmute their microphone from there. Because I can see some of you. So please, don't be shy. There's something under the Q&A. I got to learn as an adult that Muslims drink and smoke weed. Muslims can do all. In essence, we're not invincible. We'll struggle, and there are different ways of being. Okay, that's more of a statement than a question. But yeah. I mean, I agree in the sense that, I mean, sometimes it does feel like there's a higher moral burden on us. Sometimes, you're in situations, maybe typically I would say even in situations where I'm not supposed to be, somebody will see me and say, DG, Muslim, big allergy, like, what are you doing here? But I also know, you're a practicing Christian, you really shouldn't be there too. But there's a higher expectation or a higher moral burden on Muslims. It's something that we have to navigate and kind of, I think with higher self-assurance and everything, we would know where we stand with all of that. Okay, another person has their hand up. Hi, how can you hear us? Or can we? Okay, yeah, I think your microphone.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
I just wanted to go back onto the point of educating our children. And yeah. I think that when we look at when we were raised and how we were taught Islam, at a very young age, it started off with the do's and don'ts. Don't do this, don't do that. But if we look back to the time of the Sahabas, at the beginning of the prophets, the revelations to the prophet, the revelations that were occurring were not about don't do this, don't do that. It was about who is Allah, how to love him, how to knowing him. And then by the time all the do's and don'ts came, the Sahabas were just ready to let go of anything. Like, what comes to mind is when the verses for the prohibition of alcohol came. And it was said that some people were actually in their versions of bars, some had beers in their hand or whatever. And the minute they said that this revelation came down, people were just throwing down their cups. And they said that the streets of Medina flowed with wine that day because they loved Allah. So they were just ready to submit and surrender. So I think that when you start, it's basically the first step that we need to do. Teach our children to love Allah, to know who He is before we even go any further. So yeah, that's my small contribution.
Thank you so much, Awa, for that contribution.
Thank you so much, Hawa Ibrahim. Yes, fantastic. I think you bring another point in that when we learn, we learn the do's and don'ts first. We learn the do's and don'ts first, but typically it should be the other way around. We should really learn about Allah's love. I think there's, I think at some point the Sahabas mentioned that. I'm not a scholar, please, so I can't obviously quote who said, but I know the story where I think they said that if the prohibition against alcohol and all of those things came first, if the first way they engaged in Islam, by Allah, they wouldn't have followed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we are very obsessed with the do's and don'ts first, but we don't really engage with the religion from the foundations. And it's even important to note that you're right about the first few the first part of the Quran, that the first part of the religion that came down. A lot of that was about how do you love Allah, who is Allah, and all of that. And it was only after when the Muslims started becoming an actual community and they started becoming bigger and bigger and bigger that it now became, okay, these are the rules and regulations for you guys. So it's really important that we don't put the cart before the horse when we're engaging and everything. So yeah, thank you very much. Those are really fantastic words, Hawa Ibrahim. There are other Hawas as well, so I'll also mention your channel if you don't mind, so that we don't any thoughts, Bolu?
No, none. Yeah, I'm just listening to people's experiences and contributions.
Okay, we have another hand up. Hold on, allowed to talk. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, salam alaikum. Ida. Sorry if I'm making any mistakes.
Sure. Hi. Sorry, I wasn't sure if it was for me. Hi, everyone. Okay. My name is Ida. I'm actually not Nigerian, but I got invited by a friend of mine who's Nigerian, Rahima. And this is really interesting for me. I'm actually from Gambia, and it's really interesting listening to this conversation because growing up, we had Dara every Saturday and Sunday, and I would always try and escape my Dara classes because it was just, reciting this Quran over and over again, and I had no idea what we were saying, and it was just really boring to me at the time. And then sort of you grow up then you got to the age where working age where I had a lot of friends, and a lot of things you're saying was a lot of fear mongering, hearing you're gonna go to hell if you do this, you're gonna go to hell if you do that, and I was just so afraid oh my god, I feel like this conversation was about hellfire. But as I got older, I started hanging out with people like Rahima and other friends who really talk about Islam from a place of love and how, and I started just sitting and being a lot more relaxed and comfortable and realized, okay, this is actually a really peaceful, loving religion, and all of these things that are being prescribed is for your better, from a spiritual, mental, and even physical aspect is really to support you to just be a better person. And so you find that contention, I used to have a lot of contention, a lot of tension or fear of, well, my God, this means I'm a bad Muslim if I do this. But then it's such a struggle. You just sort of have a lot of these mental challenges when you sort of look through how it's presented. My question is more to you guys. I think this is a great discussion, great topic. I'm really enjoying listening to the discussion. It's great that it's actually being talked about, because a lot of times you're told, you shouldn't be discussing these things. This is what it is, and just don't go into debates on it. And I'm just wondering, how then, for all of you who are discussing this, how do you now sort of teach these lessons to your children or to your younger nieces and nephews? Are you having these conversations where you're able to say to them, Islam is such a beautiful religion, Islam is such a loving religion, and you can find your place within it? Or do you feel like they're still being taught in the same way of fear and not questioning and just following the rules as a lot of people were from this conversation that I'm hearing?
Oh, fantastic. Ida. That was great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for those. We actually have, I think you said Dara classes. I mean, I think it depends on where you're from, but we call these Ilekeu classes. We hated it as much. They're just beating you sometimes for, it's...
I'm forcing you to memorize things you don't really understand.
Yeah, fundamentally, as children, there's 0% chance you don't understand there's really, you can't connect with it. Or well, I mean, let me not speak for every child. Maybe some people, there are elements of it that work for them, but for me, zero engagement, zero. You dread the classes, you dread going, but I mean, I guess it became common practice and almost tradition to send your children at some point to go to those classes, because you don't want your children to be bad Muslims or whatever. I think in our parents' generation, maybe that was the current thinking. They obviously did not have as many resources as we had. But yeah, those were great thoughts. I know you asked a question about how do we put it into practice and all that. I think that's different for everyone. For me, I think I'm making a more conscious effort to talk to my friends, both Muslim and non-Muslim, like practically. Okay, so this is, if I hear someone that's expressing something and I think there's an Islamic point of view that makes sense, I'm no longer as shy about having those discussions. I think typically before, you're Muslim, but it wasn't one of the first things people knew about you, at least for me. And I'm trying to be more conscious about bringing that to the forefront. And you shouldn't be surprised to hear that Deji is a Muslim. You shouldn't be surprised, that I don't want it to become, oh, are you serious? Are you okay? You're Muslim, but
you don't act like a Muslim. But you don't look like a Muslim.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have heard elements of those things before. So, I mean, it's different for different people, but I think we all need to, if as long as we're conscious and we're practical, definitely we begin to see within our communities more people engaging with religion in a better way. Thank you very much, Hawa. Please,
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, sorry. Please, when you introduce yourself, please also just let us know where you're coming from. Thank you very much. Also,
I wanted to add to what Ida said. So yeah, for me, it will be more about teaching the love and trying to just like teach them to be confident in who they are. So don't be ashamed of being a Muslim. And I want to go back to the thing that you said about the high moral standards. So yes, you might not have gotten to a level where you feel like, okay, you can confidently come out and say you are a Muslim, and people will say, oh yes, you look like a Muslim, you dress like a Muslim, you have the thing on your head. Even if you've not gotten to that standard, I feel like you shouldn't be shy to say that you're a Muslim. I plan to teach my kids to be confident in their level of spirituality. Try to let them know that it's a journey and it's a forever journey. It's not like, oh, once you've mastered the Quran by age 10, you're a perfect Muslim. You're going to go on for the rest of your life not having any spiritual problem or not having any issues with Allah. It doesn't work that way. So this is something that is going to, this relationship with God is something you're going to have to work on for the rest of your life. And sometimes it's going to be trying, sometimes it will be easy, but you just need to learn to be confident, learn to love Allah, learn to trust Allah, and learn to do the things that would increase Allah's love for you and your own love for Allah as well. So I think that's one of the things we're trying to learn how to build upon here. This is why we're having this conversation, to learn from each other's experiences, see the ones we can adopt, the ones we can remodel, things like that. So thank you, Aida, for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me just read. This is also a statement on the Q&A from Khadija. She says, no question, more of an answer. I came to learn about the importance of being non-judgmental and embracing all while sharing best practice about the deen and religion. I think that might have been a response to Ida's question. So thank you very much. Khadija. So there's another hand up. So Samiat, Jinadu, I'm going to allow you to talk. Please also just don't forget to introduce yourself and tell us where you are calling, where you are right now, actually. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm in New York right now. So I guess my experience is growing up Muslim. I think the biggest thing is that as you grow older, you have to still have your own relationship with Allah. And I think sometimes when we grow up Muslim, we sort of become complacent, and it's just, there's never really like a personal connection that you have because it's just sort of the language that you have. And so right now is trying to relearn how Islam should be. And it's also interesting for me because I didn't grow up with the fear aspect of Islam because my whole family is Muslim. Most of my family is Muslim, even though I grew up in like a majority Christian like school and community. But I do think that my family sort of, because it was from my family and it was this language of love, like if someone loves you, praying to you, you know, and saying Kursi or Al-Fatiha, like for you, that's your language of love. And just because this whole idea of extremism, that came after. So for me, that really didn't affect me more than it's about learning how to be, how to have like a better relationship. And also just going off what Habiba said in the chat, this concept of a liberal Muslim family, like I feel like it doesn't really, you can be a liberal Muslim, you're either a Muslim or you're not. And so this idea that there's like a liberal Muslim is just a way to say, it's almost a way of giving like the extremist view more attention than it should have. We're all Muslims. However, you happen to be quote unquote liberal, that's not a bad thing. It's trying to make sure that you're actually putting more emphasis on the love of Allah and the community that you have. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Samia, for that. I was
Wonderful.
also even reading, I was reading Sulia's question in the Q&A section, and I think I can relate a bit to what she's saying actually, because growing up as well, my family just told me the things I was supposed to do, but there was literally no conversation around why I was doing this thing. Why am I learning the Quran? Why am I fasting? Why am I praying? Like there was literally no connection about that. So at some point in time, I had to make that conscious effort on my own to learn Islam by myself. So I think that's what Sulia is trying to explain to us. And I'll be interested in learning, hearing from people who have had the same experience. If you found yourself in a family where there wasn't much conversation about religion and you had to start learning the religion on your own at an older age, I'll be really excited to listen to people who have had similar experiences.
Okay, can I come in here? Hi, Assalamu alaikum, it's Noura. Okay, I've really been enjoying, I think, all of the input. I've enjoyed it so much. And a lot of what has been said, actually, I've thought about in my head right before now. And I think I will just build, because believe it or not, this discussion is actually building very organically. The first thing is that as children, we really are taught the do's and the don'ts, right? Don't do this and do this and do that. And thinking about it in my own head, the first thing I thought was like, this is like, if you think about your iman as like a house, right? Somebody's building a house. You might not even be as involved in that process as you think, right? You might not really be involved in it as much. You're just a young child and your brain is mopping up all the do's, don'ts, reading the Quran, because really at that time, you know, the brain is working, right? So you're learning a lot, you know, you're being forced to, but at that time, I'm asking myself that, so I definitely subscribe to the aspect of, you know, teaching children the love of Allah. That is definitely, there's no doubt in anybody's mind that is a key thing. But in terms of finding your true spirituality, right, within the do's and the don'ts, right, there's the ritual aspect of Islam, which is the prayer. And many of us can do, you know, the different motions of prayer. But, you know, for even, you know, the highest ranking Muslims, if you want to say that, they still struggle with that spiritual connection within prayer. So what I feel in terms of, you know, finding that spiritual connection is actually that it's something that is very individual. You will never be taught it in any type of setting, right? It can be enabled. So people, you can find yourself in a setting that is, you know, making it easier for you to think about it, to engage in that type of discourse. but it is a very, very individual thing. Nobody can teach it to you. You know, if anybody says, oh, I was taught spirituality, then they probably don't really know what they were saying. So I asked myself that, you know, could our parents be thinking from the perspective of, let's just build this house for them, right? They will get to a point in their lives, you know, whether we help them or we don't, or we're not as good at helping them, but they will build the soul. That's what I've called it, right? They will build the soul of that religion for themselves and put in that house. So some people are not as opportune, right, to have had an Ilekeo experience, to have had an Islamia, to know the rudiments of prayer. And believe it or not, right, even where it is forced, even where it feels like, gosh, this is, you know, terrible, having it is definitely a plus, right? So whether or not you have it is, so I feel like our parents were probably coming from a place of just teach them, right? And they will catch up with it, you know, but the main message I'm trying to get out is engaging with your spirituality and your iman or your God consciousness is a very individual experience. And it's something that you have to seek out on your own, right? So tell yourself that. And in teaching children also, don't be scared to start, you know, teaching them the rudiments. And give them, in as best as you can, a message that says, love Allah. Allah, you know, has created us because he loves us and he wants us to come to him. And that is the true, you know, essence of worship. We go back to him so frequently. But, you know, the main message is, whatever it is that your parents teach you, honestly, if you were from the most religious home or the least religious home, you would still have to seek, you know, that spirituality by yourself, is my opinion. Wallahu alam.
Thank you so much, Nora. I have actually never thought about it from that angle, but you've made actually a very, very valid point. I remember attending one of Jubril Allah's lectures, and he was speaking about the love of Allah. And he said, yes, Allah loves you, but how do we show that we love Allah? And he said it's by communicating with him 5 times a day. And that's the essence of prayer. And I was like, wow, I've never actually thought about it like that. So thank you for helping us connect all those dots. Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Nora.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Abdurrahman Mejinya. Sorry, I've been struggling to raise my hand.
No problem.
I can't quite find the icon, so apologies for busting it. But I just wanted to say 1 or 2 things on what I've heard, if you don't mind.
Yes, please, definitely.
So alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, my name is Abdurrahman Mijinyawa, and I live in Lagos, even though I'm currently on lockdown in Kano. I was caught up there, and I'm an engineer by profession, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to join this call. I think what Nura said, I think is very important. I think there's a balance to be had between building certain foundations and building this solid foundations of do's and don'ts, and then trying to get children to understand, some of the more spiritual side of things. It's a bit like the tension you find even in conventional schools, where we go in and we do our sums and additions and subtractions, and sometimes we're not really sure how they link up. But at some point, we find out, division and multiplication are kind of inverse, and we start to make sense of it. So there's a balance to be had. But just responding to Ida's question around how you teach children, I think I have a 6-year-old, and one of the things I reflect on is the way my dad engaged us. So my dad did 2 things. I don't know whether it was deliberate or it just happened. One, he was very vulnerable. So my dad will always tell you about some of the things that he did that he wasn't happy about. And so he tells it to you so that you can think about it and you can think about avoiding them. So rather than say, oh, you must not do this, you say, oh, when I was in school, when I did this happened. And for a long time, I wasn't happy about it. And, if you come across such a situation, I would like you to think about, what the consequences might be. But then around the studying in Quranic school, so I think he had one of the most ingenious ways of getting us to do that. So what he would do, there were 4 of us, myself and my three sisters. he would get us to record our recitation. And he would say, this is what he plays in his car. And that's what he played in his car. He didn't listen to other recitations. So he would say, okay, if you guys can do 5 surahs, just interchange the ayahs. So I would take the first ayah, my next sister will take the second one. And we're so excited to do it. And that's how we kind of continue to get used to it. And so once we learned something new, we'll rush home and say, oh, we now know something new, we want to record it. And that's how we got very close to the Quran very early on. And we're fortunate to grow up in Sokoto, which was, an environment where you saw Islam practiced. And, so it was relatively easy for a child to pick. But when we moved, because my dad was a banker, for almost 7 years, we were not stable because we were moving from one place to the other. And we didn't really have that ability to go to the Islamic school. But the foundation was already there. So once we settled down, it was just about picking up where we left. So that's kind of, I think the beauty of it. So I thought to share that because something I try to do with my daughter, and I find it can be quite a nice way of getting children to interact with the Quran, with their own curiosity. So I just thought to share that.
Wow, fantastic! Thank you so much, Nura and Abdurrahman. As parents as well, you have a very unique insight that Bolo and I do not have. That's very fantastic. I'm going to write some of those. I've written them down actually.
You have to notice. It's very important.
Thank you very much.
I think that's another.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Bolo,
that is one of the beautiful things about Islam. The fact that wherever you are in the world, it's the same practice, almost the same practice. So you feel like the sense of community. Wherever you are, you feel like you can just pick up wherever you left off in a different place. It's a really good thing.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the next person whose hand is up. That will be Farida Diko. I'm going to allow you to talk. Okay. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Hi, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. I guess it's been really interesting listening to everyone, I guess, talk through the different experiences. So thank you, everyone, for sharing. One thing that I wanted to share, and I guess has kind of been touched on by different people as we've been going along, is the setting in which a child first learns about Islam and how that impacts how they learn about their religion. So using myself as an example, so I went to Islamia when I was younger, and I really, really did not like it. I think that was, for one thing, I was learning, obviously, you learn the Quran in Arabic. I don't speak Arabic, and at that point, my Islamia teacher was teaching in Hausa, and I didn't speak Hausa at that point. So to me, it was just sounds and a lot of shouting and just a very, what I thought was a very intense environment. And so I didn't really get anything from that. And eventually, my mom arranged it so we could have someone come teach us in the house in English. And even that, I think the first person that we had, I don't think he got through to us in a way that we really took much away. So again, my mom found someone else. And this second lady that we used to do Islamia with, I think she, first of all, explained it in English, which to me was really helpful because I even had an idea of what was going on. And she really came from that angle of this is why you do this, really gave more of an insight into the do's and don'ts and tried to give us as much context as possible. And I think that really helped me even be a bit more excited about learning more because you have more context, and context is obviously invaluable in a lot of things. But I think, and I guess touching on Nura's point on parents, I guess building the house, I think that is super important. And obviously you want to give your child the tools to try and learn, but I think you also have to be really mindful and watchful to see when your child is taking away from, I guess, the setting that they're learning about Islam in. Yeah.
Thank you, Farida. Thank you, Farida. Great insights. Yes, again, I think obviously, you have to factor in the difference in language. The Quran is it's in Arabic, but how do you also bridge that extra gap in the mind of a young child? And that you have to be very deliberate. I don't think it's something you can just not think of. You have to be very conscious of it. And I think also, that's a place a lot of people struggled with in terms of, you're just learning symbols and pronunciations. You're not actually learning what it's. And I mean, obviously, it takes time. You have to factor in the foundation. You can't really translate until you can, or you can transliterate. You can't transliterate until you can read. So obviously, there's a foundation, but if we can see where we're leading towards, I think it will always be important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so I'm going through the Q&A. I see that Abiba Balogun had asked about the introduction to the meaning of the words we learn to recite in Arabic. I think you just touched on that. Well, I think it was when I was in uni that I started reading the Quran with a dictionary, with an Arabic dictionary, actually, just to learn the words. I don't know what other people's experiences were like. At what point did you start understanding what the Arabic words you were learning meant?
I would say for me, it was probably, I'd say maybe like a few years ago, really. You go to some sermons and they would focus on one word, and then you realize how deep each word is, and it's almost like the way you study literature, and they break down all the concepts for you and the origins of the word, the etymology, Arabic linguistics and all that. So they will do that for one word. And you realize, you're locked in for like 30 minutes to an hour just talking about one word or one ayah, and it's like, oh wow, there's so much more. So I think that also helps bring the wanting to learn about the Arabic language. Okay, I know there are more hands up, so let's just try. Also, please, we cannot see any men. We cannot see any. There are no men putting their hands up. There are not that many.
You guys, why are you people shy?
Please. So I'm going to ask.
Please, we want to hear from you.
I'm going to ask Hawa Khalil. I'm going to allow her to talk now. Yes, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. Yes,
we can. We can. Wa alaikum salam.
Okay. My name is Hawa, and I just wanted to kind of answer and touch base on a few things that people talked about. So personally, I'm Hausa. I grew up in Kaduna. I'm from Kano, and I think if we're talking about Islam, culture plays a huge role in everything, because thinking about the Hausa culture, there are lots of things that were being borrowed from the Arab culture, and also with tons of bid'ah in it. So it's sometimes when you're thinking about someone, sometimes when I'm thinking about my identity as a Hausa Muslim woman or Nigerian or what have you, there will definitely be tensions, and I'm sure it's not only for me as a Hausa person, but there are tensions at some point. And I think it's really important to try to unlearn these things that have become so intertwined within, personally, the Hausa culture and Islam, and things just kind of become very gray for you at some point, and you're like, what the hell, why am I even doing what I'm doing in the first place? So I'll give an example. There are a lot of ontological issues when it comes to even the Hausa language and Islam. There are certain words and phrases that you think, oh, it's what Islam is, but it's also actually the culture, the language in itself. So I think unlearning that has for me has played a huge role, because I remember having a conversation with my mom about certain words we used or we used to use for people that were not Muslims that passed away. And when I did my research, it was mostly cultural, not Islamic. So that tension in between you know, your culture and your religion, and primarily Hausa culture being very, very like tensed in that aspect. And there's something Jibril Alau said, and I thought it was important because I went to Islamia before I actually started attending an actual school, and it was a thing in my house to memorize the Quran before you graduated from primary school. So there was this thing of just everyone just wanted to memorize the Quran, but honestly, like thinking about it now, like you're not even proud of memorizing the Quran because first of all, you did not memorize it with the right intentions. You were just doing it because it's a norm in your culture or in your society or in your Islamia or in your family. So I think it goes back to identity, like reconstructing an identity for yourself as like a Muslim. I'm studying education identities, and I'm primarily researching on Islamic education and its connections to people's identities. And the unending question that goes back for me is always people always tend to say there are tensions between Western and Islamic education, but at the end of the day, it's actually mostly cultural. When you sit down, like break down everything, because Islam is kind of like a way of life, and Western education, I mean, there's some things that could cause tension, but at the end of the day, it's mostly constructed like as a social construct, if I may say. So again, identity. I think we generally have to kind of reconstruct an identity for ourselves as Muslims, Nigerian Muslims, or even if it's as Yoruba or Hausa Muslims or whatever identity you choose to identify as. And also for our parents, our much older parents. I don't know how much parents we have here, but I'm definitely not a parent. So I think even having these conversations with our much more older parents and grandparents, I have conversations like this with my grandparents, and we sit down, like we like talk about it and how we need to approach it in a much better way, as opposed to how they learned the religion, compared to, you know, how we have. So yeah, sorry, I talked too much, but yeah, that's it.
No, those are very valid points. Thank you, Awa.
Yeah, no, you did not. Bolu, can you let AR speak to this intertwining of the Hausa culture with an Islamic identity?
Yeah.
And I also want to say something after AR on identity in general.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, we've asked AR to unmute.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So indeed, because this is my own, understanding, because Islam has been in northern Nigeria for several hundred years. So with time, sure, there was an absorption of a lot of the Arabic culture. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was getting an internet connection issue. Okay. Yeah, so there was a lot of absorption of Arabic culture and Islamic culture into northern Nigeria, and indeed, I think Hawa was very right that a significant part of the practices that we grew up with, I don't want to use the word tainted, because I don't think that's the correct one, but have an overlay of culture to them, and the truth is that what I found is that you don't tend to realize this until sometime later. So what I would say is, if we follow the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he has said several times that we will meet Allah upon what we live this world on. What I take away from that is that Islam allows for continuous improvement. So you can continue to be better, as long as you are alive. So I don't think we should feel bad or guilty about certain ways that we were in the past, for whatever reason, whether we were negligent or whether we just didn't know. What we have is today. right? So yeah, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, maybe I didn't say all my prayers. Maybe I didn't read the Quran as much. It is what it is, right? But how about today? Right? I can be a better Muslim today. And Allah's one, Allah is Tawwabur Rahim. He says if you go back to him, he is always waiting for you. So it's never too late that, to go back to him. So I sense sometimes, and I also have it sometimes where we feel, oh, yeah, when I was in university, some of the things I did are not, I'm not really happy about. Yeah, there's all of that. But, if you acknowledge that, if you realize that indeed Allah forgives those that turn to him, then it shouldn't bother you one bit. As long as today, you are consciously trying to move closer to him. And if I may, so I was lucky to have grown up largely in environments that allowed me to learn about Islam and the Quran without much effort, if I may say, whether it was my personality or the environment. But I didn't, I wasn't thrilled to always go to Islam every day, but it wasn't a chore for me. So, but still, even at that, I realized that, or I remember that it was not until around 2000 and, about 10, 12 years ago, that I really started the journey of really understanding the Quran. And I was lucky. I came across the recordings of the late Sheikh Jafar, whom for me was the first person to do tafsir of the Quran in Hausa and to do a proper tafsir, not just the translation. Because I grew up with translations. Every Ramadan, there will be translations, and they rush through the Quran. But Sheikh Jafar did a tafsir over a period of 10 years, over Ramadan. So just like Diji was saying, he would take a verse and he would discuss it for as long as it was necessary. He wasn't bound by a time. And I remember I spent about 2.5 years listening to that tafsir. So on my way to work, I would just pop in my earphones and I'll listen about 30, 45 minutes of the tafsir. And it was in Hausa, so I could relate very directly to some of the meanings. So that was one of the ways I, kind of relearned parts of the Quran. And I think I know that there are efforts now with other languages to get those translations. And I know there are some that have been done. Use those kind of opportunities and give it time. Right? The Quran, like Olu mentioned, is a lifelong journey. It's not a day's journey. And you start. If you start today, if tomorrow Allah takes your life, you started. If you're here for another 30 years, you're still on the journey. You will never, be perfect. And in that process of listening to Sheikh Jafar, he was somebody that also addressed these cultural issues and was very, very clear in separating what he understood to be Islamic, strictly Islamic advice, and what was cultural. And so that for me helped me in making those distinctions. Of course, I live in a cultural environment, so it's not always easy to practice those things because, people, your parents, your family, your grandparents, they have a certain way they think. But like Howard mentioned as well, then you go into a dialogue mode, right? You've learned something. You say, okay, this is what I learned. But I see when I was growing up, this is what, I heard so auntie say or so uncle say. How do we reconcile those? And what I find is that I have those conversations with my parents. And a lot of times we actually do deliberate. And because everybody comes with an open mind, alhamdulillah, we end up all, leaving the conversation richer. So we have to have that, that open mind. Even when we believe that we now have some new knowledge that other people may not have, we need to be, open to allowing them the time to get accustomed to it. Not just come and say, oh no, this is culture, so stop it. You also have to give people the opportunity to grow as well.
Okay, fantastic, Air. I love listening to that. I really wanted to speak on this issue of identity. So way more than culture, because I don't want us to get lost on the culture part. I wanted Air to start because he was closer, to Hawa's experience. And I thought, he will definitely be able to relate with it better. coming from the southern part of Nigeria, I lived in Lagos, for the most part of my life, and definitely, growing up was, all in Lagos. The thing is, being Muslim in this part, you really need to cultivate that aspect of your Muslim identity. It is a task, right? It is not like being in the north where you are just mixed up with what is happening. It's something that, you had to grow up in a home that was really conscious about establishing that identity for you, right? And this is not, to be judgmental to anyone, because you hardly find any southern family that didn't have, a mix of different religions, within it. But it started from things like even your names, right? So you would find the homes in which, for example, parents felt a very strong obligation, right, to say my children will be called Muslim names because that is their core identity. That was what happened in my home. That was one thing that my father, honestly, if you know my father and you are a Dapo, a Tayo, or something else that is not Islamic, if he finds out your Muslim name, he will never call you Dapo or Tayo or any other thing. He will call you Zainab, and the name that you even forget, to respond to. And it's because for him, that was a very conscious act to say, you need to understand that your most primary identity, or the most primary aspect of your identity is being Muslim, right? And you need to establish it in the sense of, what kind of things do you do? So my father wanted it to be, as a Muslim, this is what we celebrate. And as a Muslim, this is what we don't do. So for every single action that we took, right, there was a Muslim explanation for it, and that was the first explanation. And this is not to say that in my family we're almost like a bit of an identity crisis, right? My mother is from the north, my father is from the south, and there's all these different things happening at the same time. And we are very aware of every different aspect of that identity. But one thing that was played up, right? And this is advice for people looking, to the younger generation, that you need to somehow find a way to play up, that Muslim identity, and to let them get really comfortable, seeing Islam in the same way you would see, for example, the Black race as, one big family. You should see the Ummah as one big family. Another example is pray, right? So when we do Azkar after obligatory prayer, I remember my brother used to pray for the brothers in Yemen that were dying and the people that are suffering, in different parts, because you see that as part of you, right? You have been able to relate and bring that to yourself to say, these are my brothers, and for whatever reason, right, they're in this environment that just makes it that they are suffering, and you remember them very consciously in prayer, so those kinds of things is really, as a Southerner, from what I know, my perspective, for you to, and the identity is really important, because even as a woman, understanding your Muslim identity is possibly part of the journey to actually even getting you to look Muslim, right? So however you choose that to be, whether it's by my little turban or, donning a full hijab, but understanding that identity, honestly, and deciding whether or not you want to be a part of it, or to allow that to become what is priority for you, really is a game changer, right? So it's something to think about, I would say, and I hope that there's more discussion around it, but I feel like identity is so important. Thank you, Hawa, for bringing it up.
Hey, sorry, can I add a little bit? Sorry.
Please.
Okay, I think this is where education as an institution comes into place, because I know a few schools that integrate both Western and Islamic education curriculum, and I think that plays a huge role right now. I don't know how much there is, but there are schools like New Horizons, Great Heights. It's like I attended Islamic secondary schools, and there's actually a subject in New Horizons that teaches you, that is titled Islamic Perspective, and for every perspective that you can think about from probably the West or anywhere, even most likely our cultures, they address it. So it made a lot of sense, or it makes a lot of sense when you have certain conversations or certain literally subjects like that in schools when they're being addressed. So I think it's a call for our educational institutions to be much more integrated. And even if they're not government schools, even so private schools, maybe there's a need to sit down with education or policy makers in terms of education from the private sector to rethink how to integrate both of these so we can come up with maybe the best of identities, or so that we can become more better ambassadors of Islam, I guess.
Thank you, Hawa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hawa, for that contribution. We can see we have quite a number of hands up. We would like to please remind everybody or inform everybody to please keep their contributions to 2 minutes so that we can have as many people as possible share their experiences. I noticed that Biba Balogun also asked questions on balancing religion and culture. I really hope that, in fact, I'm sure that AR and Nura have done a lot of justice to that, and I hope you are okay with what they've said so far.
Thank you. So I think we have BB. Sorry, hold on. I want to allow BB to talk.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Hello everyone, my name is Bukola. Actually just really wanted to share something similar to what Hawa said. So I'm Yoruba, but we grew up in Kaduna. And I always tell this story every time I talk about Islamic identity, which is when I was in GS1, I registered for IRS, and that's Islamic Religious Studies. And a Hausa boy in my class was like, "Oh, but how can you register for IRS? You are not Muslim." And I was like, "Oh, I'm Muslim. All my family members are Muslims." And he was like, "Oh, that's not possible. You cannot be Yoruba and Muslim." And this was me, like I was 10 years old or so, or 9 years old, and I was super confused. And then I went back home and I actually thought about it for a second, like actually all the Yoruba people because being in Kaduna, the few Yoruba or non-Hausa people in my class, we kind of knew each other, and all of them were in Christian religious studies. So I go home and I was like, "Oh, mommy, is there some sort of mistake? Like, why am I Muslim and Yoruba, but everybody else that is Yoruba is Christian?" And my mom kind of like shrugged it off, like, "Oh no, don't. There's nothing like that. Like anybody can be Muslim." But I think again, it goes back to that what Hawa was saying about the integration of Hausa culture and Islam, so much so that children are taught or children are often not exposed to the fact that Islam can be for everybody. And so that really kind of shaped my growing up as a Muslim and a Yoruba person in Kaduna. And then the thing is, like, I come from a fully Muslim background up to my grandparents. They're all Muslim, from Ilorin and from Lagos. And so, like, there was always that kind of clash between, like, being Yoruba but being, like, fully Muslim. And then my mom was also liberal, and we weren't, like, mandated to cover our hair and so on. So I just kind of felt a little bit like, you know, when you just feel like an other, like you're not quite Muslim enough for the people that are Muslims in your class, and at the same time you're not Christian for the other people. So that kind of shaped that kind of conflict that I always felt growing up until I moved to Lagos, and I really made a conscious effort to build a community of Yoruba Muslims around me, because I always felt like an other with sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so it's just like that feeling of otherness that I always felt until I made a conscious effort to kind of seek out people that I felt like were like me and understood me a little bit better. And then just to go back really quickly on something I discussed about Islamic education in children. So for us, like, we used to have an Islamic person come to teach us at home, kind of like Islamia kind of thing. But we didn't like it because it was always a very negative kind of thing. It was very stern. The ulamas were very serious, and sometimes they would come with cane until my mom was like, there's no flogging in this house. And so like the whole like experience of learning Islam through Islamia wasn't a very pleasurable one. And I remember again talking to my friends who were Christian, and they would talk about Sunday school and acting drama and dancing and singing, and it just felt like fun. It felt interactive. But for us, it was just like cram this, cram this, cram this. You need to be able to like recite this whole thing before so the whole experience. And I remember that there was on Fridays, Islamia on Fridays was always storytelling, which is when they would tell us about the story of Prophet Isa, Prophet Musa, and we loved those because they were engaging and they were visual but all the other parts were just so rigid. So I think again, like the way we teach Islamic education for children, that we really have to like change that mindset of just cram, recite the whole Quran, be able to just, but we didn't even know what we were reading. We didn't understand the purpose. And I think we shouldn't underestimate the intelligence of children. Even from when you're 10, you're 11, you're able to, once you ascribe a negative feeling towards something, it makes you really distant from it. So yeah, even though like I had to find again, like myself as a Muslim, growing up, becoming an adult, some of those negative experiences in childhood definitely shapes your relationship with the religion. And I personally, I think that's why we lose so many Yoruba Muslims who to either become a situation where they don't practice, because I know so many Yoruba Muslims that don't practice, or they eventually convert either through marriage or those kinds of things. It's just because I think we don't make some of those conscious efforts from childhood. So yeah, that's just my experience.
Thank you so much, Bibi, for contributing. I think at this point it has become necessary for me to. Walaikum salam.
Hi, Ibrahim here.
Hi, Ibrahim.
If it's okay, I think that this might be a good opportunity to drag Jibril Saba into the conversation.
I was just about to read his comments because I thought it was very important. Yeah.
Because so a lot of the things that the BBS said and Hawa said were the things that I was saying as well, right? And there was a part of me that sort of blamed the older generation for the type of Islam that I was privy to as a young Muslim. Do you get what I mean? And when I discovered this version of Islam, there was a part of me that was upset at them for, it was almost a case of, you guys kept this from me, right? And one time recently, I was talking to Jibril Saba, and the feeling went from anger to empathy, right? Where the older generation, where I saw that they were victims themselves, right? And what they gave to us was perhaps like the best version of Islam that they had to give. So, speaking about like cultural influence on religion and an identity mismatch, right? Maybe a good time to sort of pull Jibril Saba into the conversation. I think it would be great to hear from him.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me clearly?
Walaikum salam. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. I'll make it very quick because I'm learning a lot from all the feedback and experience sharing. I just thought I should mention pick on some of the things that I shared in the chat. We have to look back in order to be able to chart a way forward such that we don't repeat the same cycle. In my conversations with Ibrahim, I mentioned, and we had Sidi Mustafa Briggs here in Ramadan. I think we should bring him back to help us understand some of the historical aspects of how Islam came into West Africa. Because when we understand that, then we can understand the basis of the Quranic schools that a lot of us were exposed to all across Nigeria, not just southwestern Nigeria. There is a podcast on SoundCloud, Sacred Footsteps. He interviewed a gentleman, Professor Ware III. I think we should all listen to it. The post-colonial view of Islam in Western Africa and post-colonization, what happened with Islam. But let me focus on the Quranic school method, the ones we were immersed in. And you know, I pray all the time for my sister Nora's parents, Dr. Jubril Oyeko and Dr. Fatima Oyeko. I went to Crescent Nursery and Primary School, memorized Juz Amma, the Saturday, Sunday classes. The best experience so far with anything related to Quranic learning. After that, it was downhill. It was a lot of flogging, a lot of pain, because we left Crescent. I don't know if they stopped or something just happened and we started going to these places where we were getting flogged. We went one time to Makaranta at Legico Air Force, and the language of instruction was Hausa. I didn't speak a word of Hausa. They ask you a question and you're just looking. You don't even know it's a question, and then you get flogged. And then the same expression is given to the person right next to you, and they suddenly start reciting. And you're like, but I know that, you know? But that process is not something unique to Nigeria. Islam came into West Africa through trade. The old leaders, kings, and what have you of the big West African ancient tribes and clans were attracted to Islam by the devotion of the early clerical families to this one God. And the notion of worshiping an unseen God wasn't something that was totally new to us here, because we actually believe in the unseen. So even though they were practicing like pagan rituals and what have you, there were offerings made to unseen gods, you know. But when that ran out and they started seeing the examples from the clerical families that were coming to settle in Western Africa with their Quranic schools, they became enamored by it, their behavior, their temperament, this whole thing of ablution 5 times a day, the devotion to their scripture, and their stories of how some of the kings consulted some of these clerics who helped them with either an ailment or the other. And we must remember, the early Quranic Islamic sciences also had elements of medicine. There are stories from about the 16th, 17th century, where at the Sankore University in Mali, they were conducting cataract operations on eyes. And that was part of the whole Islamic university teaching sort of environment. And the basic level of learning was memorization of the Quran, because they saw that as the foundation of learning. And memorization has to be by rote. The language would come later. They taught the language later. But something very strange started to happen when the clerical family started coming under the patronage of the kings and the influential members of society, because now they would offer prayers on their behalf. They would do things for them as, you know, small favors here and there, and they would give them money. The earlier clerical families used to own farms. They used to trade. They were independent of the state, and they were very clear about keeping the religion separate from the state. But the minute it became fused and it became part of the state, an aspect of it became corrupted. And then when the colonialists came, I'm giving a very short, abridged version of this, and I hope it's making sense. When they came and saw this, they inserted themselves in this process. And you must remember, when you read the stories of Usman Dan Fodio, you think of him as a jihadist with the sword, but we never hear the stories that he was a jihadist of the pen, first and foremost, and it was because of oppression, you know, that he took up the sword. For the longest time, he was known as a scholar of the pen, you know, and these sort of stories abound all across West Africa. When they started giving, when they came under the patronage of the state, the colonizers came. What would you notice about the colonial masters? Did you see many women amongst their leaders? Do you recall any female governor general or any woman with a particularly remarkable position in government? No, it was an institution steeped in patriarchy. But we know that the old clerical families used to have female scholars. Usman Danfodio's own daughter, Mana Asmau, was a renowned scholar in the North. A lot of empowerment programs she ran up north for women, empowering them to trade, to learn the deen, teaching people the deen, Ibrahim Nias's daughters and what have you. And there are loads of stories around that. But all of that disappeared post-colonization. Why? Because the average colonialist, not wanting to disrupt things as they are, would go and meet maybe the most influential person they see at the time to ask them about the religion. They don't go and ask the people at the grassroots. They go and ask who they see as the most influential. And that person's interpretation is what then gets sort of like indoctrinated or integrated into the constitution, as it were, and becomes their views. And it would only fit their own worldview of patriarchy. So a lot of the things, the beauty of Islam around equity between the genders, how we treat people regardless of economic circumstances, the whole element of distributive justice got written out. And the method with which we taught the Quran and the Arabic sciences also got severely diluted. The clerical families no longer focused on their own business and building their own like enterprises, so they're not dependent on anybody, but became heavily dependent on people. And that's why you see a lot of the Afars trained nowadays in that line of training. All they do is have some big patron around them, and they go and do Isamaluruko, they go and do this, and they want to get money, and they want to, you know, unlike before. So the reason why I was saying to Ibrahim that we need to show a bit more empathy towards our parents was they didn't know any other way. You know, it's the same with Western education. I'm a second generation university trained person in my family. You know, university training in my family goes as far back as just my father. My grandfather didn't go to university. You know, so this whole notion of even Western education is actually new in my own family. It's the same thing with when you look at Islamic tradition. You know, we're now beginning to see models that are much more useful, emerging. We can take advantage of that. They didn't have that. And I'll just stop there for a bit because it's not supposed to be a lecture and I don't want to keep rambling on. I could respond to direct questions if there are any. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was fantastic. I'm going to also, I just found, you know, I think Bola and I found the podcast episode that you mentioned, the series Islam in West Africa, Empire Scholarship. Yeah. So in case anyone is interested, we're going to post that in the chat, and you can kind of copy that if you ever wanted to listen there. Bola, who do we have next?
We have me, Alao.
Okay, all right. Let's.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hello, me.
Assalamu
alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alaikum salam.
Okay. Thank you for this conversation. So a couple of days ago, I was having a conversation with Ibrahim regarding people that went to Islamia and Madrasa. I told him I couldn't relate to what he was talking about because I didn't attend one. You know, so all the flogging and things, they didn't happen to me. But talking about foundation, my own foundation was not built until I got to secondary school. There was this super amazing book by Aisha Lemu from GSS 1 to SS3 that built the foundation regarding Islam for me. Aside that, the fact that I took IRS from GSS 1 to SS3 also helped. And we also had students from Lautech come in on Sundays to teach us about Islam. So my foundation really regarding Islam actually came from either books or people who were to a large extent enlightened. So, I mean, that was what guided my journey in Islam. When I got into the university, I went to University of Ilorin. There was no building because largely you were surrounded by people that I felt were so sanctimonious sometimes you wanted to leave Islam because of them, you know. People that sometimes when you visit the mosque and, you know, they'll be surprised. So you're Muslim. What are you doing there? And things like that. And you coming from the southern part of Nigeria to a north central part of Nigeria, and you're wondering that, okay, what's the big deal in me going to a mosque? I haven't said that. I think the large point we need to focus on is building the strong foundation in terms of Islamic knowledge, either from maybe a young person or as people grow older. For me, because I didn't go to Islamia or learn from the beginning. I'm still a Muslim today. I mean, I had crisis at some point, and you know, having people that you could talk to regarding the deen and learning from them was actually very important. And you've also had people that had helped you in such a way that because they understand the deen more than you and have a more enlightened posture of the deen more than you do, it's actually helped you. It's helped you in also relating with other people that are not Muslims and be able to learn from what you know regarding Islam. So for me, that's been my journey largely, and you know, learning, going back to the basics. I mean, why Islam? Why do I have to pray? Why do I believe that God loves me? Why do I believe that um, if I sin today, I will be forgiven by Allah, and things like that. Also start from going back to the basics and looking for Islamic literatures and people that will guide you through the journey in Islam. What I think we have a problem with as individuals is also purifying our intention. At a point, I had wanted to travel to go and learn about Islam. But I mean, I traveled to the Gambia and I met a Sheikh Abdurrahman and one Dr. Jai in Gambia. And by the time they spoke to me, I knew that my intention was not purified in even learning about Islam, because the intention was to come back and come and argue with these alphas that I think are half-baked, you know. So those are some of the things that we also need to inculcate, which is the fact that purification of intention when we are learning about the deen as people and as individuals is also an important part. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Me, for that point. Yeah, that was a very valid point. And I think we're blessed now for this generation we're in. Like, there is access to a lot of resources. I'm sure in the olden days, if you actually wanted to learn about the deen, you would have to travel somewhere. Either you're going to Sokoto or you go to Gambia. But in these times now, we have access to podcasts. There are a lot of videos. There are a lot of books you can easily download. There's access to so much information. So if you actually want to start learning about the deen, moving away from what you learned growing up, you can just look out for some of these resources and start reading on your own, start learning on your own. Alhamdulillah for that.
Bolu,
Can
can I
I
just?
oh, fantastic. Yeah, go.
Okay, I think the last speaker, Lee, I think he made a really, really important point on intention. If we remember, you know, hadith in all actions are by intention. I think it's really, really crucial that we purify our intentions, you know, that we're going to seek knowledge for the sake of Allah so that we can understand Him better and we can be better servants. And then we need to also realize that Islam, or as Muslims, we have a balance, right? Balance between fear, love of Allah. Life is a reality, and so is death. We all know that, right? So we need to acknowledge the reality that we are going to die one day. And when we die, it has implications, right? And so much as we want to, we want to lay the foundation, of course, for our children to understand Allah and love Him. We also need to be able to show them that, life is also about accountability, right? We will be accountable for our actions, and there are consequences for those actions, just like in every other facet of life. So that's one point. The second point I wanted to make around what you said as well is around what I call diversity in upbringing. Because I hear, there's a lot of influence as to where we grew up or the kind of environment we grew up on us. One of the things that I think, I say, in a way, helped me was my dad's decision to pull me out of Federal Government College, Kano, when I was already finishing GS1, and take me to Adesi College in Offa to start afresh. I was very upset. I remember I always tell people that I deliberately failed the entrance exam, but at the time the school was looking for somebody from Kano, and I was the only person that wrote the exam that day. So that's how I got into school. But going to that school changed my perspective about other people, because most of my friends in that school were not Hausa. And so, a few people have mentioned, like the sister mentioned, how somebody was questioning how come she's Yoruba and Muslim. Those were never things that were a problem for me. I remember my roommate throughout university, university area, was a Yoruba guy. From 100 levels to finish, we were still friends today. He's also a Muslim. So that, it is never a thought that came to me. So in terms of to think about that diversity of thought, how do we expose them, to the fact that people are different? People have different tribes, different cultures, different religions, different education, and that influences what they are and how they come across. Because when you have that appreciation, then you know that when you're interacting with people, that they have a perspective they're coming from. It's not necessarily because they don't agree with you or they dislike you, it's just what they are. And so if you have that, then what I find is that then you find yourself in a situation where you're able to make be a bit more accommodating and be more willing to teach people about yourself. I will recall an experience I had when I went to do my master's in London. It was winter, and in the winter the sun sets at 4, and so and classes run from 2 to 5, so we wouldn't be able to. And so we were not sure what to do. At the time, we were not even aware of the provision of combining with Zuhur. So, I went to the professor and I told him that we have this problem. We're not able to say our prayers and on time before the sun sets. So he says, okay, what do you propose? And I told him, okay, that we have a 10-minute break after every hour. Is it possible to make that 20 minutes after 1.5 hours? And he said, okay. And amazingly, it's one of the things that taught me, what it means if you're deliberate and you're open-minded. Amazingly, the next lecture, there was no announcement, no emails. The lecturer just walked in and said, today, we're going to have one break after 1.5 hours and it's 20 minutes. Nobody even knew why. Nobody asked any questions. And that just solved the problem. And for me personally, as a Muslim, that gave me just an even higher level of respect for an institution like Imperial College, at least based on that experience that I had. So there's that need for us as people to be open to acknowledge that people are different, but also if we have children that we're training, to also be deliberate in showing them that diversity, because diversity is the reality of life. We're different in so many ways. And the more appreciation we have of that diversity, I think the easier it is for us, to engage with people, and even within the religion where we have diversity of opinions, it will be easier for us to reconcile ourselves with that diversity. That's what I thought I had. I thank you very much, Nii, for those points.
Thank you very much, Abdurrahman. Nura, did you have something to add? I feel like you wanted
I just wanted to just spin a different perspective on a very short statement, but I loved hearing Nii's perspective of not being able to relate to the very dreadful Islamia experiences. And I'm also grateful, and it is, of the rahmah of Allah, that he still found his way to the Islam that he's practicing today. So my spin on everything that we know and didn't like and whatnot is that believe it or not, even the bad and the worst of the Islamia, if we are all seated here today trying to unlearn, relearn, whatever process it is, it really is part of our foundation, right? It played a very important role in that, it has at least got us back into this place where we are talking about wanting to learn it properly, right? So that's why I'm thinking that as bad as it might have been, right? As I mean, I don't know anybody that was probably not flogged or whatever, but the thing is, it really still had it had a bearing, right? It played its role in whatever way, and I hope that there are more people that that loved Islam for that process than did not, right? I hope that there were more people that stayed in Islam as a result of an Islamia, however shoddily it was done, as opposed to those that left it, because I feel that it still has some bearing. So I would say kudos to our parents on that, in that respect. Say honestly, I still feel like it's all about perspective. I look back at it and I'm just like, yeah, it was it wasn't great, but
they really
it got
tried.
to us somewhere.
Sorry, I
Yeah,
just want to say
alhamdulillah.
about 6 hands up, and I would really love for us to get through them before we finish, and we have 25 minutes or 20 minutes actually left.
Yeah.
So let's try, and for everyone that has their hands up, please 2 minutes, so that as many people as possible can.
Okay, we'll go with Buki Masha next. Want to allow to talk.
Hello, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam. Hi, Buki.
Walaikum
Thank you
salam.
for being patient.
No worries. So yes, I can relate to some of the statements people have made about their experiences. I remember growing up and people saying, you don't look Muslim, you don't sound Muslim, whatever that means. I can also relate with Nura saying growing up in Lagos and how, it's a mission on, being Muslim. I remember wearing the hijab and people saying, oh my God, you're going over the top, and you sort of have to stand your ground on certain Muslim aspects of your life that you're taking up. And I think in relation to having kids, I have a 6-year-old, and I think it's very important to make being Muslim fun and exciting, and I think it's very, very important to surround them with the right type of what I call village. Children are really, really assertive. They ask questions, so you need to have, the sorts of people you surround yourself with to be people they can approach and speak to about the deen, because sometimes you're not always the only person they can approach, and they're really sponges. And I think the new generation of kids, my daughter asks questions I would never have been able to ask. So even when you teach stuff, you need to literally be on your, you be on your A game as to how to respond to their inquisitive questions. And they're sponges, so you also have to be careful as to the way you say it, and not, you almost have to kind of relearn everything you've learned from the past. And I think with COVID-19, it's been a blessing in that now you're able to learn more about your kids. And my daughter recently started a Zoom study class where the sister teaches about the stories of the Prophet. She gives them little Q&As so that they're able to sort of, question what she's teaching them, and seeing that they actually are absorbing what they're being taught. And I think also with kids also, when they're learning things, you should make the understanding of these things as cool as Western education. So like for my daughter, she's learned a verse of the Quran. I will ensure that on the next Zoom call with the grandparents or with family, she's like telling them about her accomplishments in that aspect of life, rather than it only being, oh, I know my additions or I know my subtractions. So making understanding, Islamic or education or the Quran or etiquettes of Islam being a cool aspect of her life, and ensuring that, even Islamic celebrations are exciting. I remember once upon a time, very early in her life, she used to say, oh my God, what do we celebrate? We don't do Easter, we don't do Halloween, so what do we celebrate? And I'm like, okay, you need to make Eid fun. And so now Eid is now a big thing, you make it extra special, and, presents and everything at that age. And I also think that in relation to Islam, we've sort of made almost like the middle, I don't now in the new generation is getting better, but in the past it used to be that almost like the middle class and the wealthier people were more Western education focused, and the poor people, quote unquote, were the ones, learning about Islam. So there was sort of like a division as to what Islam was about. And, so if you're wealthy, you're probably not that Islamic inclined. And if you're not wealthy, you're probably then pushed to that side of education. And I think that in general, and somebody mentioned about, in terms of having your Islamic identity. And I think when you move to the West, you almost have to make a decision as to where you stand. I remember, my very first day at work, I was thinking, oh my God, how am I going to pray? And the very first time I asked, is there a prayer room? Literally everybody ran all over the building looking for a prayer room for this one random Black girl with hijab. And they said, we don't have one, but we'll find one for you. We'll make one for you. If I never asked, nobody would never have had a prayer room to pray in. And going forward, when new Muslims came in, they had a prayer room to pray in. So I just think in general, as Muslims, we need to teach our children to have a great Islamic identity and be assertive and be able to talk wherever they are, whether they're in Lagos or in the north or in the west. They should be able to have that strong Islamic identity. I don't know whether I've sort of rambled or overly rambled.
No, that was very good. Thank you so much, Buki.
Thank you, Buki. Thank you, Buki. Very, very great points. I think next we have Rahima Aminu.
Yeah, we want to remind everyone to please try to keep it to 2 minutes so we can go through all the contributions before we round up. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I apologize. I'm walking on the road, so you're going to hear cars and people. Thank you very much for this very enlightening conversation. I just wanted to say that from the conversations that a lot of us have had, to say the least, traumatic experiences in madrasa, in Islamia, and the visceral reaction is to go the opposite direction. And the yardstick for that is how Western education is taught. But we absolutely need a balance between how we teach Islamic education and how we teach secular education. Somebody spoke earlier about how the foundations you're taught about loving Allah, which is critical, is important. But we must not forget that a lot of verses in the Makki surahs also talk about the fear of Allah, and the punishment for going against certain punishment. And I think what we fall into now is that, you have to love everything. You have to feel the spirituality, and that's critical. But the foundations need to be there. And I think Nora touched a lot upon that, about the need to have those foundations, because I do know people, for example, that, let's say, for example, they go to pray and they have nail polish or they don't cover properly, and you point it out and they say, oh, God just cares about what's in your heart, what's in your heart. And a lot of people do that, actually. When you try to correct them, they say, oh, this is between me and God. But no, we are a deen that the deen teaches us time and time again to teach people good, and then to teach them how to abstain from doing bad. And Sheikh Abu Isa, he said something very critical in a course that I went to, that he did. And he said, there are a lot of aspects of, you don't have to love doing what the deen tells you to do. You just do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it. And there are a lot of times you are told, even if you don't feel like crying, make yourself do it. What I'm trying to say is that I'm not trying to downplay the spiritual aspect of anything, but I think even parenting, we need to be able to say, yes, child, you should love Allah, you should do things in Islam that you love, but there are things that you don't necessarily have to love, but you do it because it's an act of ibadah. Because we're here in this world to be tried, and being tried means not necessarily having everything on a silver platter, whereby, okay, I'm happy to wake up at Fajr and pray. Nobody's happy to wake up at Fajr and pray, I don't know. But it's hard, but you do it. And so what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that we need a balance in teaching. What was done to us before in the past was not good, but we also have to be very careful not to go in the complete other direction and say, oh, we just let them do what they want, and so on and so forth. Another thing, is even in the conversations, we keep talking about how, things need to be taught in English. No. When we started going to school, secular school, English was not our first language, but we learned anyway. And that is how we also need to look at how to teach Islam, to teach children not just the Quran, but the language of the Quran, how to be able to understand things. So I went to Form 1, which is a school that taught secular and Islamic education. It wasn't that great in the secular part, so my mother had to fill in the gaps. But what it did for me was, even when I went ahead in life, I was able to pick up the Quran and say, okay, what does this word mean? Or this word is used here. Why is it slightly different? And it's because of the foundation that I had in the language. So I think as parents, we need to do better than the previous generations. But doing better means being able to kind of ground ourselves, understand what Islam means by balance. And it's not, for the most part, the balance that we think it is. I hope I made my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahim.
I know we're trying to really and make up for time and to get everybody in this conversation. But Rahima, honestly, you have touched on like really, really key points. And I just want to beg, this is an appeal, it's nothing more, honestly, that we never, ever, ever get comfortable with the version of Islam that we have created for ourselves. It's so easy for us to get into that space. And I think I read somebody put it up either in the chat box actually, talking about, yes, we're trying to be inclusive, but at the same time, we need to understand that we are on a journey or we're striving for something. And that something is actually many times very well laid out. You know, so for example, I don't give an explanation for why my hijab is a certain way. I know what is proper. It is clear, right? So I find that sometimes also in our generation, we sometimes get lost in trying to create our own Islam. And there's no such thing. Wallahi, that is always for me a conversation that I'm very, very passionate about. There is no version of our Islam. This Islam has been passed on for over 1,000 years now, you know, and it is also a responsibility on each one of us to actually be a soldier, right? Going back to Ilekeu days, but to be a soldier for it, we really have to defend, you know, that version that, you know, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught. So it is not for us to create our own hijab style and say, this is what, you know, the Quran meant. We are sure that this is what the Quran meant. This is where you are, you know, as an individual on your journey towards where the Quran asks us to be is a more correct way to look at things, right? So don't fight for where you are and say, this is comfort, this is the summit. As somebody said, you know, this is not, you know, the end of your journey. This is only your journey, right? And your journey is in trying to get to what Allah has prescribed for all of us. So fantastic. The other one is, you know, about accepting and not always having an explanation for, but just my father, honestly, one of my father's favorite quotes was Semi'na wa ata'na, which is we listen and we obey. And that is the summit, I believe, of any Muslim's life, which is submission, right? And that is the true essence of Islam. We're all trying to submit, you know, to the point that if Allah said, you know, here's a knife, kill your own child, you would trust him completely and say, I will do it because I believe and trust in Allah. So just to add to that and to buttress it, is very important for all of us because we are all on this journey. But we just must understand that we are not trying to create a version that is fanciful or is just, you know, you know, I just really needed to put that there. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nora.
Sorry. I think up next is Iman Adeosun Awopeju. Sorry if I spelled that. Ask to unmute.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this. There have been so many pointers and, you know, useful things that have been said. I think most of us had a very similar experience growing up with, you know, Islamia or Ilekeu, Madrasa, you know, whatever you call it. And I think most of us developed our Islamic identities as adults. And I think for me, my Islamic identity mostly, I mean, I went through the same thing as a child, you know, not really understanding why I needed to do this or that. And my Islamic identity really started to develop when I got to secondary school. You know, it was very, it actually was a defining point for me, because on Sundays, the Christians had a Sunday school and the Muslims didn't have much to do. And then one day they brought in this guy who started teaching us, and they said it was going to be, you know, IRK really. And I thought, oh, it's going to be just like the other ones. But, you know, he was very instrumental in the fact that he actually taught us Quran stories, and you know, we would have interactive sessions about them in class every Sunday, and it was something I actually started looking forward to, you know. And I think along the lines of what Jibril said, you know, it's very important that, you know, we take lessons from, you know, how we were raised Islamically, and, you know, try not to repeat, you know, the same cycle. And I think in this regard, you know, when I think around the time when I turned about, I think in my mid-20s, or maybe 23, 24, I started making a list on my phone, and I've had that list since, and I go back to it and update all the time, and it was called For My Kids. And I started making a list of things that I didn't like in my childhood and what I wanted to change, you know, in my children's childhood, you know. And there's a part where I started noting down things about how to, you know, teach my children, you know, Islam. And I'll just give you guys quickly a few points which I have noted down over the years. And, you know, some of them is along the lines of what Nura said earlier on. Is very important to be conscious about building an Islamic identity for your kids, you know, especially starting from the beginning, from when they're born, from their names, you know, and so on. I mean, it's not mandatory or anything, but it's important. It helps to build the Islamic identity, you know. And just, you know, very important, you know, having sort of like a, how do I say it, like an Islamic aura, you know, at home, and being very deliberate about your parenting style, you know, so that they're able to learn from you, you know, and just making things a routine, you know, making things like Islamic sunnah, you know, a routine, making things a habit, things that they get used to. So it's not like a set of rules, a set of don't do this, don't do that, you know, so that it's something that they are brought up with. You know, anytime I want to pray or my husband wants to pray, you know, my son is only 2, but we've been doing this with him since, you know, he was able to walk. We put him in the room and, you know, we let him watch us pray. I mean, most of the time he's crying or, you know, pulling my hijab, or, you know, trying to, you know, get on my back, or, you know, it's, but, you know, it helps to the extent that when I go to do ablution, he knows what I'm doing. And, you know, sometimes he'll bring me my hijab. So, you know, it's just, you know, doing those, having those mental notes all the time, you know, and being deliberate, and Quranic stories with them, like at bedtime, you know, trying to keep it simple. But you can actually start these things when they're very, very young. You know, with us, it's like we were kids, and then one day, bam, we just had to go to Islamia. You know, well, there was no in between. There was no build up to it. There was no telling us why we had to do it. It was just from we're playing to all of a sudden we have to do certain hours of cramming Quran a day. You know, so it's important that we build up to it and we help them to understand the reasons why they need to do these things, you know, with Quranic stories, you know, daily adkar, saying daily adkars, you know, trying to talk about Islamic topics at home in front of them, you know, letting them watch us pray, saying dua with them before they go to bed, you know, finding ways to help them to memorize Quran. You know, sometimes I make up songs when I'm saying some verses, and funny enough, my son has started following them with me when I'm putting him to bed. He knows like 2 of them off head now. You know, just little things like that to help kids, you know, pick things up and make it fun for them, so it's not so like a grueling, you know, and just faith, I guess, faith building habits really. And there's so many online tools and all of that now. So yeah, that's just what I
Man,
have.
I'm going to use my card to let another person speak.
Yeah, I'm done. Just general faith building activities at home, guys.
Thanks, babe.
Thank you.
Okay, I think up next we have Abidemi Ibrahim.
Assalamu
We're
alaikum,
really short
everybody.
on time. Wa alaikum salam. So please, if you could keep it brief. Thank you very much.
All right. I just wanted to point out something. I'm just like highlight something Hawa Khalil said about schools, because at the end of the day, most schools that we have to go to are mixed. So we also have Christians there, and obviously, if we see that, because I currently work in a school, so I see how the school is constantly trying to make sure everybody is pleased. So it kind of makes it very difficult, even if the school owners are half Muslim, half Christian. They come from a mixed religion family, so they try to please everybody, but it's still very difficult because you're trying to also be sensitive to everybody. So I think at the end of the day, taking your children to actual Islamic schools where they just like you might have to just divide that, because at the end of the day they do need a Western education. So I feel like they should also do Western education, and then maybe after school at a certain time, or maybe during the weekends, and they have their normal Islamic studies, and obviously making. So now the point would be to now ensure that our Islamic schools are teaching them the right things, because as someone said, it's at this age, at the very young age, that they actually soak up everything, and if they are not able to enjoy Islam and know the beauty of it, it makes it very difficult for them to enjoy. Also, the intention was like, I wanted to mention something about myself. Like I literally didn't even know what Assalamu alaikum meant until I went to secondary school. I never even heard about it because like I come from a mixed family. Like my mom is Christian, I'm literally the only Muslim with my dad, just myself and my dad. So it was when I went to secondary school, and alhamdulillah, I was able to make the right friends like Hawa Khalil and all. And they didn't just make it seem like, they embraced me basically. They knew, okay, this is somebody that Allah might want to guide, that might want to use us to guide. And they literally took me in and they taught me about Islam. I was learning gradually, and now alhamdulillah, I'm very in love with the religion because I was just around the right people. Even though like that was just in school, boarding school, when I come home, I still have to interact with my mixed family where everybody is Christian. Literally, I would cover my hair, and the next thing they're talking about, oh, Malama has come again, and that, you know, those simple mockery. But the fact that I had people to rely on when I go back to school kind of made it very strong. And then they would, you know, send me things, and they would give me hijabs and presents like that. And that just really encouraged me. So I feel like surrounding yourself with the right people definitely builds like a stronger bond, which is yeah, exactly, which is also why and the thing about identity as well, because I've also experienced the thing where this was in primary school, a girl came up to me, and that was when I just found out I was Muslim. So a girl came up to me and she goes, oh, I heard you're Muslim, but you don't speak Hausa, how come? So to me, it didn't even make sense. I was just like, what does speaking Hausa have to do with that? So I think that was also kind of built this idea I have about marrying I'm so strict on marrying a Yoruba Muslim, just because I plan to keep that identity, because I guess also kind of family that I've been inside just kind of gives me ideas of how I want, like it has basically shaped my mind on how I want my own family to be. I want them to be Yoruba. I want them to practice Islam properly and this and that. And also I learned that, because when I was in secondary school, I learned that how my friends corrected me really mattered, because there were some times that they would correct me in condescending manners, like, this one Harami, she has come again. But then how some of them actually corrected me, they made me understand why this thing wasn't good. I really felt the connection there, you know. And yeah, I think that's
Thank you so much,
that's what it
Abidemi.
really is. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you so much, Abidemi.
So we'll have to take one last person because of the time. But we just want to remind everybody we can keep the conversation going on Twitter. We'll share the hashtag with you. So if there's any other thing anybody wants to say, we can keep the conversation going on Twitter. I'm going to allow Moshood Masha talk now. That will be our last contribution, and then we'll let the panelists close our conversation.
Hello,
okay, Moshood, you have the floor, right?
Hi. It's just a quick one. So I went to school in Lagos in King's College, and you know, you had the IRS and you had the CRS, and I noted, I mean, even at that age, from junior secondary school on, that there was a sort of marginalization of Muslims. My IRS class is probably maybe 12, 15 students. At the end of it, by GS3, maybe we were 10. So quite a lot of the kids had left because maybe they either had Christian mothers or Christian fathers, so it was a mixture. But the school didn't seem to support the Islamic or the Muslim students. So the Christian students had the opportunity to stay in class, to have their classes. We had to find a place to have our classes. So we'd go to the assembly hall if it was free, we'll find a room. We always had to find a place to have it done. The resources weren't available for the IRS classes. And I could tell it's King's College, so you knew there were quite a lot of prominent people who actually went through the school that are Muslim. But yet, PKC wasn't Muslim, VPKC wasn't Muslim, most of the head teachers weren't Muslim. So it's quite interesting a school like that didn't have a lot of Muslim representation. And I remember on most assembly days, when it was time to pray, it was always in Jesus' name, in Jesus' name, in Jesus' name. And it was quite unfortunate. But I think something must have happened. Something must have enabled the school to say, okay, what's going on here? We never have Muslims praying. Maybe somebody must have complained. And one day they said a Muslim should come and pray. And I noticed that quite a lot of my classmates, who you would think were probably more religious than I was, could go on. But there was probably a fear. There was already a marginalization of Muslim students in the school. And no one wanted to come. And I heard the teacher say something, look, you know, we asked them to come and they won't even come. I even give them a chance and they're acting like. And I said, you know what? No matter what, I mean, even if I say the wrong thing on assembly, I'm going to show I'm Muslim. I'm going to show that we have a representation. And I stood up and I prayed. And alhamdulillah, you know, other people were coming and they were praying. And, you know, this was junior secondary school. We'll have an opportunity to go for Friday prayers and things like that. But the school itself didn't give us an opportunity to thrive, and it was less resources for us. And I feel like even at that level, it affected some of the other classmates I had who eventually probably left the religion or didn't care. Because what was the CRS was easier, they gave them more resources, it was better for them. And I think that's what we should try and promote. This was several years ago, of course. It's probably changing. We probably have more Islamic schools. We probably have more Islamic representation. But it's probably not as great either. And I think we need to support those schools. If you're a KC alumni, QC alumni, ISL alumni, maybe apart from just supporting that Western aspect of it, what's happening with the religious aspect of those schools? Maybe we can do something about that. And that's just my 2 cents. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam. Thank you very much, Moshe. Thank you very much. Representation matters. You're very right. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I believe we're just about, you know, spent for time. We would have a quick dua from Abdurrahman, and then I think we'll be able to end this Zoom session. Please don't forget, you know, we can continue having this conversation on social media. This series will be quite frequent. Growing Up Muslim. We're physically doing it beforehand, but now we're obviously doing it online. So, you know, I'm sure, you know, in the next coming weeks, we'll definitely all have more opportunities to talk. Sorry to the few people who are not able to talk right now. But yeah, thank you. Abdurrahman, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا وأخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إسرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واعف عنا واعف عنا واغفر لنا واغفر لنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا 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 أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you so much. So thank you for everyone that has contributed. Thank you to the panelists, the attendees, Tahara Collective for bringing us together as always. Everybody who have left a comment, Q&A, chat, it's all contributing to the conversation. And, you know, as a community, we want this to be the foundation for, you know, continuous greater things